Starting the wave right sets up everything for us as surfers. And as a surf coach, this is where I'm consistently coming back to time and time again, because this definitely does act as one of the biggest barriers for progression in our surfing. As some of you may know, I've been helping Brian from Longboard Sessions out with his surfing. In last week's video, I covered some of the key areas that I wanted Brian to focus on to progress his surfing. And today, I'm going to provide you guys with the exact information and the lessons that I gave Brian to excel his surfing. And the last point today is the one that Brian is currently using more and more to improve his positioning the majority of the time on the wave, to put himself in better positions for turns, for nose rides. So let's get into it. So for today, I guess if we start talking a little bit about why this is so important. So I'll draw our little wave here, okay? If we're not taking off correctly, or if we choose the wrong method of pop-up or line of our pop-up, as well as where we're popping up on the board, we can compromise what we do later on the wave, both in terms of the speed that we generate at the start of the wave and also the line that we're setting. And of course, if we're choosing the wrong type of pop-up or takeoff for the level of surfing that we're at as well, this can lead us to lots of these things that many of us struggle through, like our nose dives, digging a rail, and all of these things. So firstly, on the wave, there's two different things we can do for a pop-up. For the most part, there's a few variations. We can either do a straight takeoff, which is where we take off with the nose facing down towards the beach. Or we can do a angled takeoff. Not a great picture there. Also, where we're staying nice and high there, but where we're coming across, so the angled takeoff. Now, both of these are really important. We can also use some combinations of these, and we'll speak about that soon, especially when we come right into the pocket here. The other things that we want to be considering, and this is particularly important and something that we might not be addressing if we're coming from our beginner or intermediate stages, but it's something that advanced surfers have nailed, okay? And this is, if we kind of draw a little board here as well. So this is our surfboard, really bad surfboard. But what we need to be considering is our thirds and whether we're popping up in the middle third, so number 2 there, or the first third, so at the tail. If we're popping up in the middle versus the tail, again, there are scenarios where both are applicable, but we want to make sure that we're doing these at the right times. Let's first start with what we want to be seeing from the wave. So in the first scenario, we're going to be considering that the wave is quite slopey. So if the wave is slopey, it means that it's not going to be very critical or very vertical by the time that it's getting to us. It's going to take a fair bit of work to paddle into. What we want to be doing is we want to firstly, like we've spoken about in some previous videos on the soft skills of surfing, we want to make sure that we're paddling nice and early. Again, because if we paddle too late, then the wave is just going to be too slopey, not steep enough to actually get into it. If we've got that down pat, what we want to make sure we do for a slopey wave is that we actually get rid of any angle in our paddle and we do the straight takeoff. So this is the takeoff where we're paddling into the wave, but we're going straight towards the beach. Now, this is really, really important because I like to think if we're paddling into a wave and we're going across, the wave actually wants to send us in this direction, straight towards the beach. So every little angle that we're pushing across the wave instead of where the wave wants to push us, we're actually taking away our acceleration in that direction, and it's going to make it lots harder to catch the wave. If we couple that with the fact that it's a slopey wave and that we need to paddle really hard and it's going to be difficult to catch the wave anyway, we're putting ourselves at a massive disadvantage if we're catching the wave with the board on a bit of an angle. So that is where we need to use this here, the straight takeoff. We're actually able to utilize all of the wave's energy to get us across the wave. There's a couple of different other scenarios that I do want to walk through in this situation as well. So say we've caught the wave and it's a slopey wave and we've used that takeoff where we're facing straight towards the beach. Sometimes as surfers, if we're not really competent with our pop-up, there's a couple of different things that can go wrong. Firstly, we can pop up too far up the board if we're utilizing that straight takeoff, and that means we pop up and then maybe we're also not engaging our feet onto the board early enough, and so we're popping up in this kind of bottom third of the wave, and that's where we're at a big risk of nosediving. So we're popping up near the bottom of the wave, we're popping up into the middle of the board, and unfortunately, especially if we're on longboards, that 9-foot length of the board and the nose is just going to go straight into the water. So in this scenario where we may have been paddling for the wave and it's been quite slopey, but then we've popped up and it's a little bit too critical to be in the middle of the board, this is where we want to utilize the tail of the board. My rule here would be if we are using a straight takeoff, we're almost always popping up on the back of the board or on the tail of the board. The reason being, in 90% of scenarios, I would say, if we're utilizing a straight takeoff and it's not in a whitewater wave, and we're popping up in the middle of the board, we're putting it ourselves at unnecessary risk of nosediving. And if you are watching this video and this is resonating and it's something that you want to get right, feel free to go check out longboardsessions.com. Spent the last couple of years putting it together, and it will take you step by step through all of the equations here. Something that I'm really, really proud of, and I hope it can help you guys out. Okay, so now that we've covered that, we want to talk about the angled takeoff scenario. This is a really nice other alternative if we haven't learned to do the takeoff utilizing the tail, so we're still using that middle half of the board. So if you're a beginner to intermediate surfer and you do see a steep critical section coming towards you, this is the takeoff that you want to be using. Simply put, the angled takeoff is where we actually take off on an angle that sends us across the wave. Before you've popped up, you actually want to be sending yourself across the side of the wave, okay? So you want to be traveling in the direction that the wall is trying to send you. The errors that we usually run into here, and the reason we have problem if we're not utilizing an angled takeoff, is we want to make sure that we're following the wave in this direction, but we use a straight takeoff and we can't turn quickly enough, and we get caught at this bottom third of the wave, and then the wave kind of crashes off without us, and then we continue to either keep riding this direction in the whitewater, or we fall, or we just keep surfing straight in the whitewater. So it is a really, really important thing for us to be doing. Now, there are a couple different ways to go about this angled takeoff as well, which we'll talk through now. So the first is, if the wave is quite steep, we spoke about as we're paddling into a wave, if we have this sideways trajectory, that we're going to be wiping speed away from the way that the wave wants to actually send us. If the wave is steep, we probably can angle, I would say anywhere from your 30 to 45 degrees from the paddle in, and we should be okay to still catch it. We don't want to be right across the wave, because as the wave picks us up, it's going to tilt us over and we're going to be thrown over on the other side of our rail. So we want to make sure that we're not angled too much. I would say 45 degrees. If this is 90 and then that's 45, or sorry, if this is 0 and that's 45, that's where you want to be. Anywhere from this kind of there, we don't want to be going right across here. The other thing that we can do here though, if we're uncertain that we'll be able to catch the wave if we're paddling in with an angle, is what we can do is we can actually utilize a straight paddle in, but then as we actually start to take off, before we get to our feet, we actually do a tilt on our rail, so tilting on one side of the rail whilst we're in the prone kind of cobra position. So we actually come across the wave whilst we're still in our belly, and then we can do our pop-up once we're already sent in that direction. Again, this could be a really, really effective way to make sure that we're not rushing our pop-up and that we can actually still utilize a pop-up in this scenario in the middle half of that board as well. Now, I want to speak about it more from the lens of an advanced surfer and maybe some of the things that we're trying to build towards. If we take a look at this wave, we'll just brush this up a touch, and we're actually sitting here and we want to catch the wave. A lot of the time, what we'll be doing is we'll be paddling in and then we'll be having to take off really, really quickly. In this scenario, we'll likely be utilizing a really quick angle as we're taking off. We're not going to be dropping all the way down the bottom here. We know that, because then we'll miss out on actually being able to, go across the rest of the wave. So what we'll actually do is we're going to be taking off here at the top of the wave, utilize the straight takeoff. So we're going to actually be angled in this direction as we're paddling in. But then as we pop up, we're utilizing a few kind of steps put into one, but pressure on the inside rail as we pop up. And then as we get our feet onto the rail as well, we're continuing to hold that pressure on the inside rail so that we can continue down the line. And so with all of that, we should be pretty much on our feet around here and continuing that high line. We shouldn't have to drop too low. Definitely have to not come to the bottom of the wave here so that we can continue down. It'll all be kind of meshed into one. All right, guys, we'll leave it there for today. We'll catch you on the next one.